Today, Bob Dylan turns 70 years old, and we bring you a special on his music and his life. He was born Robert Allen Zimmerman 70 years ago today on May 24th, 1941 in Duluth, Minnesota. Raised in Hibbing, Dylan moved to Greenwich Village in January of 1961. Within a couple years, Bob Dylan would be viewed by many as the voice of a generation, as he wrote some of the decade's most famous songs, including Blowin' in the Wind, The Times They Are Changing, Like a Rolling Stone, Masters of War, Desolation Row, and Mr. Tambourine Man.
The Tambourine Man, play a song for me. I'm not sleepy and there is no place I'm going to. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. In the jingle jangle morning I'll come following you.
In 1963, Bob Dylan performed with Joan Baez at the March on Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech.
Oh, the time will come up when the winds will stop and the breeze will cease to be breathing. Like the stillness in the wind before the hurricane begins, the hour that the ship comes in.
After emerging from the New York folk scene, Bob Dylan would explore many other genres, from rock to country to the blues. He continues to tour to this day. In 2008, the Pulitzer Prize jury awarded Bob Dylan a special citation for his, quote, profound impact on popular music and American culture, marked by lyrical compositions of extraordinary poetic power. But before Bob Dylan became a musical star, he was one of countless young musicians in New York City trying to get heard. Some of his earliest radio appearances were on Pacifica radio station WBAI.
Bob Dylan is, well, you must be 20 years old now, aren't you?
Yeah, I must be 20.
Are you?
Yeah, 20. I'm 20.
When I first heard Bob Dylan was, I think, about 3 years ago in Minneapolis. And at that time, you were thinking of being a rock and roll singer, weren't you?
Well, at that time, I was just sort of doing nothing. I was there,
So you were studying?
I was working, I guess. I was making pretend I was going to school out there.
Today, we're going to celebrate Bob Dylan's life with a special show featuring many rare early recordings of Dylan. We'll also be joined by the legendary WBAI broadcaster Bob Fass, the host of Radio Unnameable. The show began in 1963 and became a leading outlet for the emerging counterculture of the 1960s. It still airs every Thursday night at midnight. Bob Dylan appeared on the show several times.
This is Bob Fass. We're back on here with Radio. And remember I told you about 10 minutes ago that we were going to have somebody come up who wasn't Shirley Temple? No,
come on, I don't do this to me.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing?
I'm not supposed to do it. I'm not going to apologize for not being Shirley Temple.
You want me to introduce you like Mike Wallace?
No. I want to be,
this is Bob Dylan.
No.
I can't say who it is? Oh, all right. Okay.
Along with Bob Fass, we'll be joined by music writer Elizabeth Thomson, co-editor of the newly reissued book No Direction Home, The Life and Music of Bob Dylan, written by the late Robert Shelton. I want to begin by going back to early 1962, when Bob Dylan appeared on Cynthia Gooding's program Folk Singer's Choice on WBAI. It was one of his first radio appearances. Special thanks to the Pacifica Radio Archives.
And now you're doing a record for Columbia.
Yeah, Admitted Already is coming out next month. Or not next, yeah, it's coming out in March.
And what's it going to be called?
Bob Dylan, I think.
That's a novel title for a record.
Yeah, it's pretty strange.
Yeah. And this is one of the quickest rises in folk music, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but I really don't think to myself as in a folk singer thing. Because I don't really much play across the country at any of these places, you know. I'm not on a circuit or anything like those other folk singers. So, I play once in a while, you know. But, I don't know, I like more than just folk music, too. And I sing more than just folk music. I mean, as such, like, people label just folk music. Well, you know, I like folk music as, you know, Hobart Smith stuff and that. But I don't sing much of that, and when I do, it's probably a modified version of something not a modified version. I don't know how to explain it. Just that there's more to it. I think old type jazz things, you know, Jelly Roll Morton, you know, and stuff like that.
Well, what I would like is for you to sing some songs, you know, from different parts of your short history. Short, because you're only 20 now.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I'm looking for one.
He has I gather, a small part of his repertoire pasted to his guitar.
Well, this is, no, actually I don't even know some of these songs. This list I put on because other people got it on, you know, and I copied the best songs I could find on here from other guitar players' lists. So I don't know a lot of these, you know. Gives me something to do, though, on stage.
Yeah, like something to look at.
Yeah. I sing you, oh, you want to hear a blues song?
Sure.
Bob Dylan in 1962, appearing on Cynthia Gooding's program Folk Singer's Choice on WBAI, one of his first radio appearances. He appeared a number of times on WBAI. On Bob Fass's show, the legendary radio programmer, his program continues to this day. It's called Radio Unnameable. Bob, it is a great pleasure to have you on Democracy Now!
Well, that same goes for me, Amy. I'm very happy to be here.
So, when did you first meet Bob Dylan?
Well, I first heard about him, of course, before I met him, in a lot of different places. And I'm certain about one of them. I was an actor at the time, a poor young actor, believe it or not, who didn't know a whole lot about almost anything. I was in a play by Brendan Behan called The Hostage. And I learned so much there about Ireland in its revolutionary period. And people ought to look that play up and take a good gander at it, because it'll goose them to go on further. And I was sitting there trying to remember my next entrance when I was a replacement in the cast. I wasn't cast in the play in the beginning. I was there probably for the last month of its run, which I think was a couple of years. And I noticed the stage mistress, the woman who was climbing the ropes and changing the lights and telling the rest of the people in the chorus when to sing and where to stand backstage, and telling us, shh, the audience out front can hear you. And she was so good at all these things that, among other things, she was really wonderful to look at. But I knew there was a lot more than a pretty face there. And somehow I was lucky enough to remember that. And somehow when she said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure why, but you." And she said, "Well, you should see my sister." Her sister was Suze Rotolo, who was Bob Dylan's very best live-in roommate friend at the time. And, I was more than a little interested. And after a couple of weeks, I asked her to, have a cup of coffee with me. And she said, all right. And we had the cup of coffee, and I got to know her a little better. And she said, "Do you think that I'm good looking? You should see my sister, and you know who her," this was on the down low, "boyfriend is?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Dylan." I said, "The poet?" She said, "No." I said, "Who?" She said, "Bob Dylan." I said, "Bob?" She said, "Yeah, well, that's not really his, but we'll tell you more about it later." And I hung around long enough so that I got to visit them all in their shared apartment. I got to play poker once. I was very bad at it, but he was brilliant at poker. And, I was fascinated by him. I got to drive around with him. I got to spend long times talking to him. And there were moments there that I'll never forget.
I want to go back to Bob Dylan's early WBAI recordings. In May of 1962, he appeared on the Broadside radio show on WBAI. This show was hosted by, well, Pete Seeger, Sis Cunningham, and Izzy Stone. This is Pete Seeger.
I'd like to hear some of the songs that Bob Dylan's made up, because of all the people I've heard in America, he seems to be the most prolific. I don't, Bob, do you make up a song before breakfast every day or before supper?
No, I don't make up a song like that. In fact, sometimes I could go about 2 weeks without making up a song.
I don't believe it.
Oh, yeah. But then sometimes, well, these are the songs that I sing. I might go without 2 weeks and make them up. But I write a lot of stuff. In fact, I wrote 5 songs last night. But I gave all the papers away someplace. It was in a place called Bitter End. And some were just about what was happening on the stage. And I would never sing them anyplace. They were just for myself and for some other people. They might say, write a song about that, and I'd do it. But I don't sit around and do it with the newspapers like a lot of people do, spread newspapers all around and pick something out to write a song about. It's usually right there in my head before I start. That's the way I write. I mean, it might be a bad approach. But I don't even consider even writing songs. When I've written it, I don't even consider that I wrote it when I got done.
Put it together.
You made it up.
Yeah, I just figured that I made it up or got it someplace. I just sort of... The song was there before me, before I came along. I just sort of came down and just sort of took it down with a pencil, but it was all there before I came around. That's the way I feel about it.
We can let him give us an example of how these songs just sort of come to him and flow through him.
Well, I think this particular song is historical in the sense that it's the first psychological song of the modern generation that I've heard.
I took this from Bonnie Dobson's tune, Peter Amberley, I think the name of it is. What you see, I stand before you all. I was judged by you a murderer, the hangman's not must fall. I will die upon the gallows pole when the moon is bright and clear. And these are my final words that you will ever hear. If I had some education to give me a decent start, I might have been a doctor or a master in the arts. But I used my hands for stealing when I was very young, and they locked me down in jailhouse cells. That's how my life begun. Oh, the inmates and the prisoners, I found they were my kind. It was there inside the bars I found my peace of mind. But the jails, they were too crowded, institutions overflowed. So they set me loose to walk upon life's weary tangled road. And there's danger on the ocean where the salt sea waves split high. And there's danger on the battlefield where the shells of bullets fly.
That was Bob Dylan on the Broadside radio show on WBAI, which is hosted by Pete Seeger, Sis Cunningham, and Izzy Young. You were smiling, Bob. You were singing along, too.
I was there when some of these programs were recorded, kind of lurking in the background.
Were you doing your own show at that time?
No, I was an engineer at the station and an announcer at the time.
Well, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Bob Dylan, his impact, his music, one of the remarkable moments when he sang Blowin' the Wind, one of the earliest recordings. And we're going to talk about his life. It's hard to believe, but yes, Bob Dylan turned 70 years old today. Stay with us.